Welcome aboard Imagination Skyway, your guided tour through the worlds of Disney and Imagineering. I'm Matthew Krull, and I'm on a mission to better understand the stories and places we love and the people who bring them to life. In today's episode, we continue our exploration of the cultures represented at Walt Disney World. If you missed part 1, be sure to revisit our previous podcast episode. From the bustling streets of Harambe to the colorful gardens of the France Pavilion, Walt Disney World offers guests the chance to experience and learn about other parts of the globe. In our discussion, we share some of our favorite examples of the ways in which the Imagineers transport us to global destinations without leaving Central Florida. As you fasten your seatbelt, I encourage you to take out your mobile devices and search for Imagination Skyway on your favorite social media app. Better yet, if you're looking for ad-free episodes, bonus content, or the ability to comment directly on the podcast, head to patreon.com/imaginationskyway, where you can sign up for a free account or a premium subscription. And if this episode leaves you yearning for a trip to Disney or any other destination, reach out to our partners and sponsors at KMV Travel by visiting kmvtravel.com/skyway. As we begin our journey, please remain seated, keep your hands and arms inside the podcast at all times, and enjoy your journey aboard Imagination Skyway.
So I was thinking through which countries that are represented of the 11 pavilions that I've been to. Obviously, I have been to the U.S. I live here.
Colonial era specifically, or
yeah, of course. I'm 300 years old. I have been to Canada very briefly to see Niagara Falls, and unfortunately, my only time spent in Mexico, I was at an all-inclusive resort and I was in my young 20s and did no actual, cultural travel. I just sat on a beach and drank pina coladas. But I have been to both Italy and Germany, and visiting the pavilions after having been in those countries. It's obviously, you've got Florida's climate. It is not the Mediterranean climate of Italy. It is not the temperate climate of Germany. But if you forget what the temperature feels like, it does feel, it's the closest thing you can get to being in those countries without being in those countries. So in Germany, we did a lot of castle tours. I'm a huge history buff. I love castles. And knowing that some of the castles I went into, specifically Castle Eltz or Burg Eltz, the Imagineers used those castles to inform the design of like the ramparts in the back of the pavilion. The architecture in Germany is represented there. I do find the Italy pavilion to feel a little more authentic to the experiences I had. For example, in Beer Garden, Beer Garden feels like a weird in-between. So I did, the typical casual beer garden in Germany. It is not so rowdy. There's not constantly live Oompa music, which is fantastic at Beer Garden if you haven't been. But if you go to, Oktoberfest in Munich, which I did, it is far rowdier than a time at Beer Garden. So Beer Garden kind of straddles the two distinct experiences. And also I've never seen a buffet in Germany, so that part's a little unusual. I wish they just served like a whole roast chicken like they do at Oktoberfest. But anyways, I digress. In Italy, though, in the Italy pavilion, stepping into the Italy pavilion feels like my time in Venice specifically. There are nods to other architectural styles from different regions in Italy, but Venice really was the inspiration point there. So it just feels like everything's in miniature. So Doge's Palace, if you're looking at the pavilion, it's on the left, it's the pink building. It looks so authentic, if just smaller. And then the bell tower directly next to it, which interestingly, in St. Mark's Square in Venice, the bell tower is actually on the opposite side of the square from Doge's Palace. And Imagineers were going to reflect that in the design of the pavilion. But when they saw the renderings, the bell tower was butting up against the American Adventure.
Yeah.
And they didn't like how the skyline looked, so they just smushed the bell tower next to Doge's Palace in the Italy pavilion. But the architecture there feels so on point. And it's not just the Venetian architecture. So like across from Doge's Palace in The pavilion, you'll notice like there's a, can't remember the stores that are there, the shops that are there, but you'll there's like some stucco walls and the clay tile roofs that are very typical of like a Tuscan home or building. Um, if you walk around the pavilion and look at the plant life, there's olive and lemon trees, and the music feels quite authentic to what you would hear if you're sitting in a cafe or grabbing a slice of pizza. Um, I'm trying to think of what festival. It'd be Flower and Garden. During Flower and Garden Festival, they do a special Italian garden that has like fresh herbs and spices. And my husband and I took a cooking class in Florence, and we went and picked those same herbs and spices that are on display during that festival. So I just the attention to detail, specifically in the Italy pavilion, just feels and I feel like if I'm missing that trip, because it was a wonderful trip, I can look at photos on my phone, but even better is just stepping into that pavilion at Epcot.
That's a you gave two great answers there between those two neighboring countries, and there's a lot of places I could go with this. I know that to add to your mention of the authenticity specifically of the Germany pavilion, this was an article I wrote for, believe, 2024, late 2024 about, yeah, that's right. I think it was for November of 2024, if I'm remembering correctly. But it was about uh, the Oktoberfest restaurant, and more broadly about the Germany pavilion, and the other the whole square of the Germany pavilion is meant to represent a very traditional German Platz, which is a plaza. It They compare that in the Imagineering Field Guide to sort of an American town square, and you mentioned some of the places that are influenced by that influence the Germany pavilion. There's also that in that center of the courtyard, there's that statue of Saint George, the patron saint of soldiers slaying a dragon. And there's many German villages that feature a similar statue that's thought to be a symbol of protection. And the one that's in the Germany pavilion is modeled after the one found in Rothenburg. And according to German legend, St. George killed a dragon to save the king's daughter. And that's what continues on, that folklore continues on at Epcot. And one of the things we haven't really touched on too much is also the music, right? So the folk music that's played in Germany and in Italy, all the World Showcase pavilions, those are inspired by those traditional folk songs you would find in those countries. And then we've talked about so far exclusively in Animal Kingdom Asia, the music that you're going to hear over there. Like if you were to Shazam the music that you are listening to in Asia, it actually sometimes does come up with an actual song that you could like save on Spotify or Apple Music, or pick your music streaming service of choice. And so like in those cases, the Imagineers went to those countries. Same thing is true for Harambe. They actually went and they picked out certain songs that represented that period of time that they wanted to convey, and those parts of the world that they wanted to convey. And it's great that they, in those places in particular, chose like a needle drop option. They're just taking music and plopping it back in, as opposed to creating their own Asian inspired or German inspired or Italian inspired music. So it brings you, music and food are two things that really bring you into a culture. And I think they do the music exceptionally well. So
Two comments on music, and one I'm gonna speak for Kathy, and you can take over. Kathy stayed at Animal Kingdom Lodge during the holidays, and there you visited Animal Kingdom Lodge during the holidays
Yes,
and
I've stayed there
found
immediately.
yes,
Yes, actually, you know what? I have. I'm sorry.
and I know you better than you. What was interesting about that was you found the playlist that has these true like African songs. Not all are Christmas carols, but just seasonal songs. And I believe you found like a list of that music that they sourced and they play it.
Took me years. Um, when I when I first heard it, it was the winter. It was my birthday is December. So my husband got me 2 nights with a Savannah View room in I think 2015. And I know this isn't the subject of this particular episode, but Animal Kingdom and Animal Kingdom Lodge and the holidays are honestly, Tim, for you, it's Christmas around the world. For me, it's Animal Kingdom and Animal Kingdom Lodge and the way they um, really strive to have a African experience around the holidays. And so throughout the whole resort, you could hear these beautiful songs that were very clearly African, not American, not European. And in 2015, there was just no way to find the playlist. And I found it, I think, last year, and we put it in the magazine. I was really excited. So, sorry.
That's so cool. I love music
Gorgeous.
loops, and if you, I'm gonna have to look this up. I don't think I've seen that one yet. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, Kathy, while we're with you, why don't we go to your next answer?
Okay, I have two more. Are we gonna have time to do two more? Or do I have
Oh
to do
yeah,
like a
yeah.
Sophie's Choice thing
No,
where I
let's
pick
do
one?
two more.
Okay.
Yeah. So you could do one now. We'll make sure to get the other one too.
Okay, so I did say that I was going to do one more Florida one, and this one is even farther outside the theme parks than Disney Springs. And it relates directly. This is the chapter I have in my book about Disney, and the chapter is called Disney Saves the Everglades. And it is, I tell people, it is the only thing you can do with the name Disney and the title that is absolutely free. And it is Disney's Wilderness Preserve. And it is absolutely the best representation of wild Florida because it is 100% wild Florida. It is as the crow flies or as the Tinkerbell flies, 20 minutes due south of Magic Kingdom, but there's a joke that Orlando is an hour from Orlando. So it's really more of like an hour car ride to get to Point Siena, Florida. And what happened was when the Walt Disney Company wanted to build Celebration. That involved, unfortunately, destroying some wetlands. And the law is, at least the law right now, is that if you're going to do that, you have to do some sort of mitigation. You have to improve something else. Now, developers do this all the time. In my neighborhood in Florida, we tore down pine forests, historic longleaf pine, to build a suburb. And the mitigation that was done here is a retention pond. Could Disney have done that? Absolutely 100%. Disney could have done lowest bidder, least possible effort, satisfy the government, which at the time was very sympathetic to the Walt Disney World, the Walt Disney Company. But what they did instead was so cool that it's really it's something that I wish more developers would take note of. They found a large parcel of land that was slated to be developed into thousands of homes. And it was at the time degraded cattle ranch. So the area where the Walt Disney World Resort is built, some of it was wild, a lot of it was cattle ranching. Florida's one of the largest cattle ranching states. Cattle came to North America through Florida. People don't realize this. We're a huge cattle state. So there was a lot of cattle ranch, and cows tend to get ticks, which are, gross. If you ever had a tick on a dog or even worse on you, it's kind of icky. So cattle ranchers, to get the ticks off their cattle, used to walk them through arsenic baths, which arsenic is not, let's just say arsenic is not sustainable for a lot of things. And if arsenic gets into the soil, it really makes it useless. So it was looking like maybe a suburb was going to be the highest and best use of this, what they call degraded land. On top of that, some of that land was land that the Walt Disney Company tried to buy from people when they were buying the property for the Walt Disney World Resort. And at least one of them, and I have a podcast episode I did with Hal Bowers about this. At least one of them was somebody who knew it was Walt Disney trying to buy it, held out for more money, and the Walt Disney Company said, "No, thank you. We don't want your money, or we don't want your land. We're not paying that much." And at the end of the day, decades and decades later, it became part of this land that the Walt Disney Company, as it was about to be sold off and developed into tract homes, and clear cut. This sort of development in Florida is unfortunately almost always clear cut and replanted with immature trees. Um, the Walt Disney Company swooped in and said, you know what, we're going to use this to offset what we're doing with Celebration. And they restored the land, but what's so incredible about it is when they restored it, I've had state park rangers say to me, Kathy, I wish the state had the money to do this type of restoration because they tore everything out. Everything that was bad got removed. They restored it. And today, the Disney Wilderness Preserve, when they were done, they actually took the land and turned it over to the Nature Conservancy. They don't even own it anymore. So they did all this wildly expensive, far beyond what was required. Um, Restoration of historic wetlands. There's no trace of it ever having been a cattle ranch. It has the Florida scrub jay has several nesting pairs there. The Audubon Society lists that as one of the 100 most endangered birds on the planet. There's longleaf pine, which is a critically endangered tree and supports a lot of animals that don't live anywhere else. Wood storks, I mean, they've restored it and it's a beautiful slice of Florida. It looks like it would have looked before humans moved to Florida. And I always like to tell people, if you can take the hour, there's two hiking trails there. One is short and appropriate for most kids. It is not Disney World. So there are not there are real wild things there. Please do not touch the snakes if you see them, which you probably won't. Please do not try and pet the pigs because they're not actually pigs in here. They're wild boar and they're not friendly, and you hopefully won't see them either. But you will see a lot of birds and wildlife, and it's a wonderful hiking trail. There's also a longer hiking trail if you feel like making a full day out of it. And if you really want to experience Florida's environment and what Florida is like at its core and its essence, there's conservationists like the National Geographic photographer Carlton Ward, who just wildly praised the Walt Disney Company for it, and rightly so. I mean, he points out that if you wanted to walk from the front gate of the Disney Wilderness Preserve down into what's left of the historic Everglades, you could do it without passing another human or building. And it's just something I always like to call out because the Walt Disney Company, the resorts focus on World Showcase, Animal Kingdom, all these cultures and environments across the globe. But they've done this one really cool thing in Florida that's done a lot more for the Everglades than honestly our own governments are doing in some cases. And it kind of gets unsung because it's not Disneyfied, but it's Disneyfied in another way. And it's absolutely, I think, the best way.
Well, thank you for sharing that because I guarantee that most people listening, unless they live locally, have not heard of it. And it's well worth mentioning and hopefully, and if you're listening, visiting.
Absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
In the winter months, may I
that.
suggest, if you're coming down for summer break in July, please do not go there in July if you're not used to Florida heat. It will leave you a limp, dried out rag. If you're like me, it's going to be fine in July. Bring in lots of water. There's no gift shop. There is a water fountain at the start of the trail, but it is not Disney World. It is wild Florida. And, it's buyer beware with that sort of thing. Hiking shoes, water, sunscreen, hats, insect repellent. But it's well worth it. So
very, very cool. Thank you for sharing that. I personally haven't been either. And that sounds like something that I need to probably add on the list to check out. Usually when I'm there, I don't have a car. So I'll have to rent a car and go check it out.
The next time you're there, call me.
I will. I definitely will.
I will be your guide through the Wilderness Preserve. I almost never get lost.
I love it. I'm going to need that too. I'm struggling with where to go next. So all right. So I'm going to go to a part of the world that hasn't been represented yet in our discussion and is something that I apologize to the listeners of this show have probably heard before, but it is relevant for this topic. And that is it's multiple cultures. It's not just one, but the South Pacific culture is represented at the Polynesian resorts. And in particular, not just Polynesian in its traditional form, but Island Tower as well. has a lot of cultural ties to Hawaii and the South Pacific. What I found interesting, there's a lot of debate, uh, in the Disney community about the old lobby versus new lobby for Polynesian. And one of the things that was interesting in my research for the episode about Polynesian that I did was that the opening day manual for Polynesian mentioned that Maui was the resort's mascot, and he was chosen because he slows down the sun to make the days longer, so that, quote, our guests may enjoy the slower paced, more casual atmosphere of this delightful South Seas resort. The tropical waterfall feature that was a part of the resort for a long time, was replaced with the resort's mascot, Maui, in 2014. It opened up the lobby a little bit more. But I like to tell people that there is a tie back to the original spirit of the resort. It wasn't just a modernization, but it was also going back to the history of the resort itself, and now physically representing Maui as you enter in, so that you get that, even if you don't know it. That's sort of the experience they want you to have there. And also in that new lobby experience, there are these round glass lights that are hanging from the ceiling. Those are made from glass fishing floats. And floats such as those were used throughout much of the early to the mid 1900s to keep fishing nets afloat. And they were often lost at sea and been known to wash up on the shores of the Western United States and Western Canada and Taiwan and many islands across Micronesia. And over the years, the floats have been collected by beachcombers who have turned them into everything from lights to tchotchkes and lots of other things. So Disney sort of took upon themselves to also use that tradition of those to create sort of like a chandelier of sorts with those glass fishing floats above the centerpiece. Of course, the tied to the islands themselves or with the longhouses are named after Pacific Islands. They've gone through some changes, but within their names, but those represent a lot of the Pacific Islands. Of course, not all of them, but many of the Pacific Islands. What's cool also is that the Hawaii state tree, the kukui nut tree, was planted there in 1997, and it was donated to Walt Disney World by the people of Hawaii as a symbol of peace and protection. Of course, we talked about music. The resort's music loop features music from the South Pacific. Island Tower in particular, there's a lot that was mentioned in like Disney Parks blog articles and in the, I think, D23 magazine and in the Disney Files, Disney Vacation Club magazine about the inspiration, which was, or I should say the inspirate, more the ties to the cultures that it represents. So similarly, thinking about the light fixtures, so the light fixtures that are hanging from the ceiling of the lobby are made from preserved plant materials. And it's just one of a few examples or several examples of the tower's biolithic design, which is this, for those who are not familiar, a philosophy that aims to better connect spaces and their occupants to the natural world. There's also that 3-story mural that's in the lobby, and that tells the story of the sea and the sky. And it does have some Moana character appearances that you'll see in there. There's a school of fish swimming above the dining room at Wailulu Bar and Grill, and that's ghost net art. Those sculptures are fashioned from reclaimed fishing nets. And the last thing is that the tower uses a 30% reduction in energy use compared to similar sized resorts. And that's through optimized heating and cooling, energy efficient lighting, and the first all electric kitchen at Walt Disney World, which is tying into that same spirit of not only just trying to connect spaces in the natural world, but also do better for the natural world at the same time. So there's a lot of South Pacific influence, a lot of details I didn't mention here, but that are present at Polynesian Resort. You can really go on a hunt across the property to find some of those influences, and so it's one of the most classic places you can go in Disney. One of the first places at Walt Disney World, and has that direct tie back to Hawaii and several other cultures and islands across the South Pacific. So that would be my addition to this.
That kukui tree, I've not been able to find what I would call a reputable source, and I've seen conflicting answers. But I believe it was at least the first kukui tree to be planted on mainland U.S. But some sources have said it is the only, or thought to be the only one. But I cannot find strong enough evidence to suggest that it is the only one. But it is a rare thing, at least on mainland continental US.
Yeah. It'd be hard to find the factual evidence to support that as the only one.
Yeah, but
But
hope maybe the
first might be
first.
better. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a little easier to, I guess, to
yeah.
support. Um, I have a few that I can go to, but I know Kathy had one left. Tim, how many do you have left?
I have two. I can keep it to one, and I would love to plug just two little experiences you can do
Yeah,
to really expose yourself to some other cultures too.
yeah, let's
So,
do it. So I'll keep it in this order. Tim, we'll go to you next for your
okay.
final one. And then any others you want to throw in as honorable mentions, I might have an honorable mention on my end as well.
Yeah, so I want to plug a couple things. One is there's an experience you can do at Animal Kingdom Lodge. Our photographer, CJ, for the magazine, he just wrote about it for this June issue. You do not have to be a guest of the resort. It certainly helps to be one because it's an experience that takes multiple days to finish, but it's called String of Memories. And so kids or adults can go around the resort and take part in different crafts or experiences working with the cultural representatives who work at that resort. So some of the things that CJ and his daughter did was they learned how to play a few African instruments. They they played with fake animal dung to learn more about some of the animals on the savannah. But as you complete these different exercises, you receive a, I guess, you have a strand that you put little like, not pearl is the wrong word, Kathy. What am I trying to?
Charms.
Charm, yeah, some kind of charm to represent that experience. And when you've completed them all, you'll have a complete, they call it the string of memories. And so that's just a fun, free thing you can do around the resort. Again, you don't have to be a guest, but not all of the experiences are available every day. So you'd have to spend a lot of time visiting each day of your trip. But it's a cool thing you can do if you're there. And then what was the other one I wanted to quickly plug? Oh, we always talk about drinking around the world at World Showcase, but there's actually a lot of really cool museum exhibits that if you take the time. The last time I was there with my husband, we actually spent like 4 hours of our day just visiting each of these museums and taking in the exhibits. We would pause and have a drink, of course, but starting in Mexico, I've already talked about. There's the Dia de Muertos exhibit right now. In Norway, there's this really cool exhibit Kathy wrote about earlier this year, where you can learn about Norse Vikings and gods.
I love
Um,
that exhibit. It's a great place
yeah,
to cool down and escape the crowds too,
yeah,
because not a lot of people think to go there.
exactly. The Japan exhibit right now is kawaii, like cute culture. So it's just a really cool experience to go see all these like little tiny versions of everyday items that have taken Japan by storm. But what I thought was really fascinating about this area is I recently visited with our former operations director of the magazine. She's now left the company, but she used to be a museum curator. And so she'd work on exhibits and has a lot of strong opinions about how exhibits are put together. And she was talking about how well done these are. Some of them she liked more than others. But she was commenting on the accessibility of them. So a lot of the exhibits will have their placards low enough that people in wheelchairs can read them, little kids can read them. And that's just something that not every museum might take into consideration. So she was just really impressed with the accessibility of them and the depth that they went into. But I think there's something in Morocco on the Rally of the Gazelles. There's one in China that is about Shanghai Disney largely, but yeah, there's so much you can do in these pavilions beyond eating and drinking, and so I think that's just important to highlight. There's also kid cot stations, I suppose, too, if you're traveling with kids, where you can um, go around and participate in different activities. But
You didn't mention my favorite one, Tim.
what did I miss?
In the American Adventure, when you walk inside, um, if you go immediately to the right, as you walk in and go immediately right, there is a gallery that is curated and it represents several tribes throughout the United States. But my favorite place in all of World Showcase, is the first window because it is largely given over to the Seminole tribe of Florida. And what's so cool about that is that everything else in that whole gallery, they have worked with the Museum of the American Indian. And then they went specifically to Atatike, which is the Tribal Historic Preservation Office in the museum for the Seminole tribe of Florida, which is Florida's first people. Very similar to the Miccosukee. They're just different in politics. It's genetically not that different. And they work with them and they swap out the exhibit periodically. And they use the museum's curators. The museum has, I believe, complete control over what they put in that exhibit. And they are telling what we call a decolonized narrative. Like most American history, when we teach it in schools, is taught through the lens of we were British colonies and here's that history. But there's this whole history of other that often doesn't get taught. And Disney allows the tribe to tell its own history. And that's my favorite exhibit in World Showcase. And I know you were going to mention it, but you were very chivalrous and let me talk about it instead. So I didn't use up my last one on that.
Of course.
Gentlemen.
Yeah, so I think those are just some smaller things you can do around the resort to expose yourself to different cultures that I think we don't think about when we're planning our Disney trips, and it makes for a more unique experience. But the last big thing I wanted to talk about, we could talk about the Disney Conservation Fund in lots of ways and all of the work they're doing to not necessarily at Disney World, but the work they're doing to benefit animals throughout the world. But one that I find really interesting is there's a bird called the Guam kingfisher, or in the native Chamorro language, it's the seaheck. So I actually spoke earlier this year with Dr. Deidre. She's a veterinarian at Animal Kingdom. This is a bird that went extinct in the wild in Guam in the 1980s. About 25, 30 birds had already been captured and brought into captivity because scientists sensed that this was happening. There was an invasive brown tree snake on the island that they think was brought over on World War II ships. So they recognized the population was declining. Anyways, fast forward to the early 2000s, and Disney's Animal Kingdom got involved with the group. It's let me check my notes. The Guam Bird Rescue Project. So there's 9 organizations in the U.S., including Disney's Animal Kingdom, that are working to eventually bring this bird back to Guam. That involves building up the species and learning more about the species to understand what will make it thrive. But it also involves getting rid of that invasive snake species, which is easier said than done. So as an interim step, they released 9 seaheck on the Palmyra Atoll, which has a similar climate to Guam. One of those seaheck was one of the birds from Disney. This is not a bird you would see if you walk through the aviary on the Jungle Trek. So this is something that Disney is doing because they care about this species and other species like it. It's not a guest experience, but behind Rafiki's Planet Watch, there is what they call the Avian Research Center, where they are breeding birds and studying birds. Some of them are out on show. They'll appear on either of the trails. I think some might be in the bird show. But largely, these are birds that Disney is working to help restore to their natural environments. And what I thought was so interesting about the seaheck is it's actually important to the Chamorro culture. There's a folk tale that kids learn about this bird that has not existed in Guam since the 1980s. So they're learning this folk tale with no frame of reference. So the bird is orange and blue and white. So there's this story about a woman in the village who has an orange handkerchief, and she's dressed in a blue dress with a white apron. And to put it bluntly, she never shuts up. So everyone's really annoyed by her. And so some spirit called I didn't write down the pronunciation, the Teotimona, transforms her into the seaheck. So this woman becomes the bird, and then it's meant to explain why this bird is so obnoxious and loud. So anyways, this is a bird these kids learn about, and they it's one of the folk tales. And they don't get to see this bird. So when I was talking to Dr. Deidre, that was what stuck with her was she is working to help bring this part of Guam's culture back to Guam, so that they can fully understand that story. I thought that was just really, really cool.
That's amazing. Another example here of Disney kind of going above and beyond, even beyond the publication side. They're not discussing this in corporate messages. They're just doing it, which is really I love that they're doing these things. And the conservation fund is obviously a big part of Disney's Animal Kingdom and broadly Walt Disney World's. A lot of a lot of those efforts go to support that conservation fund too. That's a really cool story. I had no idea. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about it. Um, Kathy, I know you said you had one left, so let's go to your final answer.
Yes, this is another one I just wrote about. I spent a lot of time in Animal Kingdom this past winter, and it was an article I had a lot of fun writing about how you could learn to speak different African languages in the African section of Animal Kingdom. And I had a lot of fun. I actually even started to learn Swahili in Duolingo to be able to understand some of how the verbs conjugate to go with the language. Because um, if you go through Harambe, what you're going to see is a lot of Zulu or Swahili signage. But what it is, it's the Bantu group of languages, which are actually 500 different languages, and they're spoken from Cameroon to Kenya to Cape Town. So, it's to give you an idea of the scope of this. We're very, three of us, we're very American. Um, and the United States has slightly more than 340 million people, but Bantu languages are spoken by more than 1.5 billion people. So if it's not Zulu, it might be Swahili, but it's one of those, and they have all these different signs throughout there. And I think the one that really stuck with me the most, and there's a ton of them. If you go over to Tusker House, you'll find a bench and it just says Uhuru 1961 on it. Now, the word Uhuru means freedom. And in our Animal Kingdom backstory, Harambe, which is not a real life village, won its freedom from its colonial oppressors in 1961, but it's also the year that Tanzania got their independence in the real world. So I think it's just a really interesting nod. It's just very interesting to me, and I imagine to other people once you start to dive into different languages and you can get some easy translations like, and I'm going to butcher this, unawazeha kuhisi upendo usiku waleo, basically means, can you feel the love tonight? And that's as you're facing the queue for Kilimanjaro, if you look to your left, there's a big gate, clearly cast members only, but there's a silhouette of a scene from The Lion King, and that's what's written in Swahili above it. So it's just this really cool thing. And I always go back to how we created Animal King. We didn't. I had almost nothing to do with it. In the late 80s, early 90s is really when this was coming into being. And you think about the Imagineers going through this research, and as you mentioned, they of course traveled the globe. They spent time in Asia and Africa, and they created all these things, and they couldn't possibly have predicted that one day there would be millions of people going through here able to pull up an app to find out what these words meant. But once you start to look at the words and you look at, you start to wonder what the significance are. It's like this rabbit hole of what can you learn about some of these cultures that speak the Bantu language group. And it's really amazing. I could, simple things like Tamu Tamu means sweet, sweet. And that's, of course, the place that sells all the Dole Whips in Animal Kingdom. My favorite is the one with the very crude drawing of Mickey Mouse. It says Fichua on it, and that means hide. So it's a very ironic hidden Mickey because it's Mickey and hide. But you have to know what Fichua means for it to get the joke. So I think it's just really cool.
I love that you talk about Harambe because I didn't put it on this list. So again, I was hoping somebody else would, just because having worked at Kilimanjaro safaris,
Right. You
I,
know it
I
all.
I don't know it all. But that there I loved learning about that part of Animal Kingdom. And I've talked about it before, so I wanted to leave that one aside. But Kathy, I'm so glad that you brought it up. And
Well, I
there's
love reading what you write about Animal Kingdom for us because it
oh,
is my
thank you.
favorite. I mean, if I could have my own kitchen at Victoria Falls and my own little house with my dogs at Animal Kingdom Lodge and go to work at Animal Kingdom, I'd probably never leave just because I think it's so immersive and so beautiful. We didn't even get to talk about Nomad Lounge. We didn't get to talk about Animal Kingdom in the holidays. Can we do a whole Animal Kingdom podcast? Is that
Oh, we
possible?
probably could. I could easily fill podcast episodes with information, or spend lots of podcast episodes. I mean, talking about Animal Kingdom. So yeah, I think we could jump to that next. Um, all right, so Tim had three left. I have two. I'll make one my honorable mention, and then I'll jump to the last one. So I'm going to make my honorable mention the France Pavilion and its ties to French culture because there's a couple of very interesting things about the France Pavilion. First, obviously, when you look at the France Pavilion, it is distinctly Parisian, and that was, of course, intentional. It's drawing from La Belle Époque, which is the beautiful age. It's that period in Paris between 1850 and 1900, during which Baron von Haussmann ruled the master planning of the city, and he imparted that very striking Parisian look upon the city. It's maxed out at 7 stories, except for one building I got to learn about in Paris, and outside of the downtown financial district of Paris, and that's the traditional arrondissement section that's there. And the thing that I really enjoyed, there's lots of little details, but the thing that I really like is that the Eiffel Tower that you see was constructed using blueprints originally drawn by Gustave Eiffel himself at a 1/10th scale. So it's the using the exact same blueprints as the actual Eiffel Tower, which was really cool. So there's lots of little details. I am eventually planning to do an episode about the France Pavilion. That's my next one I want to cover in World Showcase. So I'll spare the additional details for that. But my final answer here is actually another pavilion at Epcot, and I think the most authentic at Epcot, which is the Morocco Pavilion. This was not one of the original 9. It was the second to last, nor was the last one, but it was added in 1984. The pavilion draws inspiration from primarily 4 cities in Morocco: Casablanca, Marrakesh, Rabat, and Fez, and draws from a lot of traditions of Islamic architecture. But what's really cool that I think I've talked about on the show before, it was worth repeating here nonetheless, is that King Hassan II of Morocco at the time sent some of his malems, which are his finest craftsmen, to work on site with the Imagineers, generating hundreds of thousands of square feet of carved stone and tile work. So it really is, it's like, I think the only case where the actual country represented sent somebody or a team to help build the pavilion. And that really does give a lot of authenticity to the stone and the tile work that you see. What's cool about the design of it is that the pavilion itself, like, I've never been to Morocco, so I'm going by what I'm researching here, but most Moroccan cities are divided into 2 sections, a new city and an old city. And the Morocco Pavilion is created the same way. And in the what usually defines the entrance to an old city called a Medina is this gate, and the pavilion also does feature a replica of the gate in Fez, which is called the Babu Jalud gate, and this is it's typically part of a protective system of these cities, so it's usually not very welcoming, but the Imagineers tweaked Epcot's version to give it a more pleasant context and make it feel more inviting to invite you into the pavilion. Also, the fountain that you see is a replica of the Nejerine fountain that you can find in Fez, and you're also going to see a prayer tower or minaret that you'll find in the Moroccan skyline. These are replicas from the Shela minaret from the capital city of Rabat, and Koutoubia, I mean, is minaret from Marrakesh. And of course, if you're looking for the authentic cuisine, you're going to get a lot of Mediterranean and featuring some more distinct Moroccan cuisine at Spice Road Table and Tangerine Cafe. Admittedly, I really do miss Restaurant Marrakesh. I thought that was probably the most
Best restaurant on
undervalued.
property.
So good. I was so
Goodness.
bummed when it went away. I'm just hoping they bring it back. And I know that you're not going to find as many adventurous eaters in Walt Disney World, but if it really, like, you could find food there that is not all that adventurous. Like, you could find like grilled chicken and couscous and vegetables. Like, it's very, very, very delicious, homey food. It was really, really good. So I miss it. But obviously, happy that Spice Road Table is there. That was something that kind of not directly replaced, but got in place of Restaurant Marrakesh. And the last thing I'll say, which is important, I think it's something that, as an Imagineering fan, I have to mention, is how the Imagineers blended the Tower of Terror or the Hollywood Tower Hotel for Tower of Terror with the Moroccan architecture, because the Imagineers knew that with the sight lines, you were from the Belt the Mexico Pavilion going to see Tower of Terror very clearly behind the Morocco Pavilion, and the forced perspective would be all off. Fortunately, it was the back of the tower that was going to be facing the Morocco Pavilion. So they used the appropriate colors and blended in some Moroccan inspiration into the architecture, which was not very far-fetched from some of the architecture you would see in Los Angeles at the time, and seamlessly blended it, both the colors and the design, into the skyline of the Morocco Pavilion. So you get Moroccan inspiration not just in the Morocco Pavilion, but also at Hollywood Studios at Tower of Terror. So I still think the Morocco Pavilion in general is one of the most underappreciated pavilions at Epcot, because it doesn't have a major attraction. It really, except for, Spice Road Table's there, but I would argue it doesn't have a major restaurant either. Its original restaurant is gone. So you're really just kind of there, if you've got kids, maybe to meet Jasmine, and maybe walk around or shop a little bit. But otherwise, it's a pavilion a lot of people pass by, and I think is one of the most underappreciated at Epcot. So I had to make sure that was represented in my answers here.
I agree with you. That's it's a beautiful place, and one where I've never found a hidden Mickey. I wonder if that's intentional.
I have to go into my hidden Mickey books if I can find them. I wonder if there's one that's there.
I'm sure if not, one of your listeners will be happy to let you know I'm wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a couple of diehard hidden Mickey fans who are listeners of the show. So if you're listening to this one, please let me know if there is one there.
There recently, I said something to one of the cast members about really wanting the restaurant back, and they said, and this is of course all unverified, they had been told there was almost somebody coming in for the restaurant, but it didn't work out. So that leads me to believe, if true, at least they're still looking.
That's good. It's
I want to believe.
Great spot.
It's so good.
It really is delicious food. I'm hoping that it something goes there. That would be great. In any case, obviously, I think just by listeners listening to this and the fact that we didn't cover everything gives you an idea of the sheer amount of cultural influence on Walt Disney World. And that's just covering Walt Disney World. That's not branching out to the other parks that are out there. And so I think this is a worthwhile research topic for a lot of listeners. If you're curious, even ask the cast members in different areas, especially known spots like Epcot's World Showcase pavilions and the various sections of Animal Kingdom. I personally am very excited to see what the Imagineers are going to bring to the table besides what they've announced for Tropical Americas. That brings a whole new part of the world into the palette, and I am excited to see that come to life in just a few years. It's right around the corner. In any case, a good point for us to stop. But like I said, I want to make sure that we give you both the opportunity to plug what you have going on. Kathy, I want to start with you because you've got some books, as we've mentioned, podcasts. So where can listeners go to hear more about you and hear your work or read your work?
So if you are a podcast person, I would suggest that you check out Florida Spectacular. You can get it anywhere fine podcasts are represented. If you want to get more about Disney's Not So Secret Land deal in Florida and some other Disney myths, my co-host and I, Rick Kilby, had Hal Bowers on the show recently, and you can find that. That's episode 204, Walt Disney Didn't Buy Land in Secret and Other Disney Myths. But it's all Florida. It's all good Florida stuff. Definitely, if you're into Florida and podcasts, worth a listen. I think I may be biased. And then my most recent book is called Florida Spectacular: Extraordinary Places and Exceptional Lives. And I know I stumbled over that. It's because the publisher and I argued over the title for a while. And that's the one where you'll find the chapter Disney Saves the Everglades and other great things. It's basically a book to make Floridians feel good about being Floridian instead of buying into this narrative that we're all idiots. And then my first book is Back Roads of Paradise. It's a travel narrative about retracing the Depression era driving tours of Florida. I had a lot of fun writing them, which is what I go by when I tell people to have a lot of fun reading them. I have a website, greatfloridaroadtrip.com. And of course, I love to write for WDW Magazine, and you will find my work primarily in the print version of the magazine, where I work alongside you and the storied Mr. Timothy Moore.
All great places. I'm going to make sure to plug all that in the description of this episode. Tim, I'll throw the same question over to you.
Yeah, so I'm the editorial director at WDW Magazine. We are just a Disney media company, really. So we've got, as Kathy alluded to, a print magazine. You can also access it digitally. We've got not just WDW Magazine, DLR Magazine as well, which is a quarterly publication. WDW is monthly. So DLR is, of course, about Disneyland. And we are working on launching a DCL magazine about Disney Cruise. We called it our float test issue earlier this year. We are hoping to have some updates about that later this year, but we're looking to hopefully launch it as a subscription product. But right now it's a one-off issue you can access. We also have, we're all over socials. We've got two websites, so www.magazine.com as well as Dad's Guide to WDW. But yeah, you can subscribe to the print magazine. You'll be able to find this issue that we're plugging specifically. It's our June issue. It'll be available on our website by the time this airs as a back issue if you want to purchase that one. And Matt's got you set up with a nice discount. It's a 15% discount if you use the code SKYWAY. But you can also sign up for a digital membership if you don't want a print magazine every month. You can access all of our issues. We've been around for more than a decade. So I think if you include WDW, DLR, and all of the special issues we've done, we're well over 150 at this point, and you can access all of that digitally. So yeah, go check us out.
Yeah, and please do. And I will say that the whole team at WDW Magazine, both of you included, have pushed me to be a better researcher, better writer, and more thoughtful about everything I produce. So a lot of the influence for this show's growth comes from writing for WDW Magazine for the last 4 years. So thanks to both of you for continuing to push me to new heights.
Always happy to have you in the magazine.
You're fun to edit. I am the copy editor, so after Tim does the heavy lifting, I get to make sure that numbers are spelled out when they're supposed to be spelled out and things are italicized when they're not supposed to be or are supposed to be. And I just enjoy reading. Sometimes actually it's hard to edit you because I read you and I shouldn't be reading. I should be looking for things and I have to go back and read you twice, which is not really a hardship. I like your writing.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you. Hopefully listeners will check out all of the things that we mentioned and will get much more information and knowledge about so many different topics, Disney and beyond Disney. But Kathy and Tim, thank you both so much for being a part of this discussion. I will definitely have you both back again and looking forward to whatever our next discussion is going to be.
This was an absolute pleasure, and I cannot wait for you to ask me to come back, because the answer will, of course, be yes.
Awesome.
Yes, always a pleasure. Thank you, Matt.
Welcome back to Imagination Central. Before you exit this episode, remember to follow Imagination Skyway on social media and share the show with anyone who might enjoy listening to our program. For ad-free episodes and bonus content, create a free account or sign up for a premium subscription at patreon.com/imaginationskyway. When you're ready for your next vacation, remember that listeners of Imagination Skyway can get rewarded for booking a trip to Disney in 2025 through KMV Travel. Simply fill out the form at kmvtravel.com/Skyway and make sure that you select Imagination Skyway under the How Did You Hear About Us question to be eligible for a special gift from the team. Terms and conditions apply. As you disembark, please remember to remain fully seated until the podcast comes to a complete stop, then gather your belongings and watch your head and step as you exit. Thank you so much for joining me aboard Imagination Skyway, and remember, if we can dream it, we can do it.